Being healthy, it's something all guys kind of want, but sometimes we wonder, how does it happen? How can I do it? What do I do with all the information that's out there? There's crazy diets. There's my friend's diet that he says it's worked. Does it help me long term? What do I do short term? And then what about supplements? What do I take? I go to my supplement aisle at the store and there's a million and I get confused. It's just very hard for a guy to know where to start. What do I do? And how does it affect my long term health? Well, we're going to continue our interview today with Zack and Vincent, Zack Shreier and Vincent Gudenus, and they're here to talk to us about how our daily choices, how what we take in really can affect our long-term health, and how there are some simple things we can do to really bring ourselves to a new place of healthiness. It's very fascinating material. Today, we're going to be talking through supplements, how they work, which ones are good ones, what are some basic ones. They give you some other ideas of things you can do with that. We talk about the specific benefits of intermittent fasting. They give us some examples from their life of how they do it and some things they do to help their energy to stay there so they can still perform during the day while they're fasting. And then they give us some simple ways to start. What are some things you can do right now? What are some simple things you can do to begin to walk that journey of long-term health? And that's just it, guys. It's a journey. It's one step at a time. You're not going to fix it all overnight. You just start moving one step at a time toward a healthier direction, and you're going to be amazed at what happens. So after the show, check out the show notes. We've got information about Zack and Vincent. We've got information about their website, and they also discuss some links. I'm going to put those down there too, so you can go to those, so you can make the best choice for you. And that's really what it has to happen, guys, is you have to decide, am I going to take responsibility for my health? You can say it's so-and-so's fault or so-and-so's fault, but in the end, we got to step up, and it's up to us. So guys, I challenge you, start taking your health seriously. Start making just little changes. You're not trying to go do a marathon tomorrow. Just start moving toward healthiness, and you'll be amazed at what happens in your life. So let's jump in the show.
Welcome to the Confident Man Podcast, empowering men with the confidence they need to live their adventure. Now, here is your host, David Maxwell.
So what does a guy do? Because, you just named off a bunch of things. Where does a guy start? To know, like you hear about magnesium all of a sudden and you're like, okay, am I supposed to take that? So where do they know, or how can they figure out where they need to start? What would you suggest for them?
Sure. Yeah. Well, if I guess I'd say if they've got some patience, and in about 2 hours, Andrew Huberman just did a great episode on supplementation, and he talks about supplements for all different areas of life, including what you would do if you're on a budget. So he's basically, if you're constrained financially, and you only say have $20 to spend a month on supplements, then the first thing to do is focus on the foundations. So that would be potentially a multivitamin, and also fish oil. That's probably the most healthful supplement that you can take individually.
Yeah. Okay. And what about, I've heard people talk about for joints like glucosamine, was it chronomonium, or I forget how you say it, but does that help people, or is that one of those things they're not sure about?
Yeah, I think that stuff does help. And actually fish oil is very good for joints also. It's really good for all around inflammatory response in the body. Actually, people have the conception that inflammation is a bad thing. Inflammation is actually a necessary part of the repair process. It's really chronic smoldering inflammation that's a bad thing. If you're always inflamed. Just a quick anecdote. Folks have heard of the Maasai tribe in Kenya. They move about 10 miles a day. They're constantly moving. And so it's just a fun little tidbit. Like if you say, to a regular American, okay, they move 10 miles a day. How many calories do you think they need a day to replace basically the activity that they're doing? People are like, 10 miles, that's a shit ton. So it's gotta be 3,000, 4,000 calories. It's too. Their bodies are efficient at using calories. Instead of basically what we Americans are spending our 2,000 calories on is sitting at our desks and creating smoldering inflammation in the body.
Exactly.
If you have a healthy, active lifestyle, you end up being better at using those calories, and this chronic inflammation is reduced. So that's definitely, I think that's a key piece. So fish oil is great for that. It instead of blunting inflammation, it stopgaps the inflammatory response, so you're not chronically inflamed longer than you have to be.
Okay.
Other things that folks might use for that could be curcumin supplements, especially those that are made more bioavailable, because there's some issues with the absorption of curcumin. I'd say in that case, you might also want to pair that with creatine, because curcumin can basically suppress some of the male hormones, and creatine can encourage their healthy levels.
Okay. Okay. And you mentioned earlier greens. I've heard people talk about greens. What are greens? What I've seen people shaking bottles, and you see people selling it for their home business, and it always seemed a little kind of strange to me. So what are greens for our guys out there? What do they do?
Yeah, sure thing. So greens, as in like the regular vegetables that people would have, as part of a healthy diet, basically support detoxification, and also provide essential minerals and vitamins. And so that's really a primary reason that greens are an important part of the diet. Especially in today's consumption environment, we get a lot of exposure to a lot of toxins. And so to support the body's detoxifying processes is important. And then basically greens powders are just, the most important, most healthful, most potent greens, usually freeze dried and then put into basically a powdered form. And there's some cases in which the actual vegetables themselves might be more useful. So this is talked about with like broccoli. Apparently you activate the sulforaphane, which is one of the important polyphenols in broccoli, by chewing. So it may not belong in greens powder. But other things actually are just as well absorbed in powdered form as they are in the full vegetable form. There's one more thing that may be important here, which is the fiber aspect. So sometimes it's useful to have foods in their regular form, because that digestion process basically benefits from having that structure, as opposed to breaking down freeze-dried form. But for many of the important materials in vegetables, you can get them from a powder.
Let's say a guy wants to begin the process of taking charge of his health. You talked about that podcast that talks all about supplements and budgets. What can they do diet-wise? What are some simple things they can begin to do about their diet to make some positive changes that, like you said earlier, Vincent, will have long-term positive effects as also helping right now?
Yeah, well, we really love, neither of us are doctors, so can't, don't take that as medical advice, but we certainly love fasting as a long-term health intervention.
Now, when you say fasting, like the intermittent, like the 16-8, kind of bringing that into their life?
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, it's important for somebody who hasn't done it before, it's important to, fast slow. So you might start by pushing out your first meal by an hour, and then you might do that for a week, and then you might push it out for another hour until you get to that 16-hour or more fasting window. So it's important to ease into it, because as Americans, we're used to 5 or 6 meals a day or snacks a day, and we're really not fat adapted. And so it's important to start slow. But we love that as an intervention for long-term health, and we really think that fasting isn't a fad. Our fasting is an integral part of our evolution. Really, our brains have evolved in part to perform well in a fasted state. Our brains love ketones, which is the fuel that our bodies produce when we're fasting. And so we really think that people should look into fasting, and there's awesome resources both on our site lifestacks.com, but also on YouTube. Andrew Huberman, who Zack mentioned, has done extensive work on fasting also, and certainly encourage people to check that out.
Yeah. And then now the LifeStacks, is that something that can help people move into that fasting lifestyle so they don't have the where they feel bad or stuff like that? Is that one of the things that could help them move into that 16-8 kind of lifestyle?
Yeah, absolutely. So in a modern context, you really want to perform well and be able to get through your workday even when you're not eating. So we think that fasting isn't about feeling deprived. There's ways you can feel just as great and in fact perform better while fasting with a little support. And that's why, in part, why we created LifeStax MCT. It's certainly a fasting aid, even though that's not the only use case. Even when you're not fasting, it's awesome to feel a little bit better, perform a little bit better, and do something for your long-term health too.
Okay, what about people who are active, like if they do triathlons or if they do some type of really rigorous CrossFit physical activity? What can they do to make sure if they do the intermittent, that they ease into it and it doesn't affect them when they do their workouts?
They should be especially focused on protein during the eating window. So basically, there seems to be an upper limit as to how much protein you'll absorb from a single meal. And that's come into some question, but roughly around 30 grams of protein for your normal guy is something you should shoot for roughly 3 times a day. It depends on body weight also. And actually, as you age, people are encouraging even more protein because it's important to keep on muscle mass. And so sometimes you hear like up to 1 gram per pound of body weight per day. Some people even exceed that. So yes, I think that's a key piece. Also, you need to fuel endurance work with the right substrates. So that's fat and that's carbs. The more intense the exercise, the more carb dependent you'll probably be. Some people use keto as a tool for extending endurance, but it is clear that glucose does support performance. So even athletes that do keto during the training phase tend to consume carbs during longer races. But the carbs is not the same thing as a slushy or something like that. There's pure sugar and there's quality carbs, and usually what distinguishes them is quality carbs have other nutrients besides just the sugar, and they've got fiber, and that basically allows for a smoother uptake and usage of that energy than if you have just a pure bolus of sugar.
So it's better like to have a sweet potato than like you said to have a slushy, or something like that. Okay.
Dave, if I could add one thing here, there's these truths that a society holds to be self-evident about nutrition. One of them being that you need food first thing in the morning. So I grew up in a household. I wasn't allowed to go to school before I had a big breakfast. So it was a huge revelation to me that I don't actually need to have food first in the morning. In fact, I can have a better day and feel better if I push that first meal out by a good amount. And so that was a massive discovery for me. The other thing another thing that people hold to be self-evident is that you need to eat before a workout, or at least you need to really fuel up before a hard workout. And that, of course, is true for if you're doing a race or if you're an elite athlete or something or something like that. But what Zack and I discovered, and many people are getting into this more as well, is that fasted workouts are actually a really awesome intervention also.
Interesting.
So Zack and I might go on runs beyond 60 minutes and just do that fasted, or even go to the gym fasted. Now there's you obviously got to take care if you're an elite athlete or if you're doing particularly strenuous exercise, but fasted workouts are an awesome tool also.
Okay. And is that something to where for someone who may be moving into a fasting workout, if they work out during a time they're not eating, doing something like the LifeStax can help them kind of make that transition? Or is that what y'all do to help you with that?
Yeah, that's exactly. That's now my daily routine. I take our MCT. Usually I'll have that in the morning, do a few hours of work, do a short or even a longer run, and then break my fast. Usually in the early afternoon. Of course, sometimes on the work day that doesn't work, but on the weekends that's my routine. And it's one of the key adaptations that you gain by doing endurance activity is to become more adept at using fat as fuel. And so, and part of the reason that's so important is that we've got a limited amount of carbs stored in the body. So when people hit the wall in a marathon, that's usually basically the depletion of those carb stores. And so somebody that is better at using fat as a percent of the total energy need won't hit the wall, or not as quickly at least, because they won't deplete that carb store. Basically fasting and working out together can help the body to learn to use fat as a fuel because you haven't taken in any carbs. But of course, people have to ease into this because you can't just expect to be fat adapted on day one of this stuff.
Yeah.
So you probably start with easier sessions when you're fasted, and then eventually, as you get more comfortable, you can do more intensity during your fasted sessions.
Okay. And now the 16-8 can be like you guys do it as kind of you break it around noon, but if someone's maybe their schedule's a little bit different, you can do it pretty much anytime. Like you can do a breakfast to lunch and then just not eat dinner and do it that way, right? So they can adjust it to their lifestyle, right?
Absolutely. In fact, what you just said about having food earlier in the day and then taking time off in the later part of the day actually might be the best thing for circadian rhythms and sleep quality. But we're not only bodies, we're minds, and it's pretty difficult for minds to do that, I think. As soon as you've eaten food in the day, it's hard to stop yourself for the remaining 12 hours of the day. And so people tend to shift it towards the afternoon and evening. But one thing to keep in mind is to not eat too close to bed, because that will disrupt sleep quality.
Yeah. And if someone does, like they're doing a regular intermittent, but one day a week, they don't do the 16-8, that's not going to really mess them up or anything, is it? If they just, they do it a few times a week, but not necessarily every day.
Absolutely. Yeah. No problem with that at all. Folks find themselves feeling better, during fasts, the more they do it. And so you might end up deciding that, just breakfast just isn't for you. Certainly people would make a habit out of not eating too close to bed. And so those are the pieces that might stick around, but there's really, these benefits don't require, performing fasting on a daily. There are things that you can do intermittently.
Okay. Now, if a guy wants to find out more information, getting stuff, you said your site has like articles, things like that, links they can do to kind of get, because I don't want to send them to a million sites, but if they go to your site, you've got links to a lot of information and things like that.
Yep, for sure. And our sort of database of articles is growing. So over to lifestacks.com and you'll see, a handful of pieces that we've already compiled and some science that we've compiled on the site as well. But that will grow over time. And actually, I should say we'll add more products over time. So our goal, as we've already discussed, is really to create these really lovely interventions that allow you to feel better and also healthier over the long run. And the MCT is a great way to do that. We're super happy to have this as a first product, but we've also got other things in mind that we're currently working on.
Okay. And let me ask this before we end. We've talked about supplements. There's supplements everywhere. Where can a guy know that he's getting a decent supplement and it's not, because you hear things about, oh, don't get supplements from here, or everything on Amazon is fake, or, your grocery store doesn't have good ones. How do you know without spending, like you said, $1 million for supplements?
I guess my most generic recommendation here is, of course, LifeStacks. We've got clean stuff. Then if you're looking for individual ingredients, Nootropics Depot. It's got an excellent reputation. They publish all of their in-house research that they do on the ingredients. And so that's very clean. And then also places like Thorn, places that do third-party testing on their products are reliable as well.
Okay. And then I've heard people talk about some of them have a USP. Does that, that you should get ones with USP on them? Is that like a certification? Is that a real thing, or is that just something people say? I don't know.
Yeah, the certifications are useful. We look at GMP, so whether the manufacturer that produced the product practices good manufacturing practices, and the FDA actually certifies that.
Okay.
And then there's also NSF, which is basically the specific category of supplements that are approved for sport. And that is like the most stringent criteria that manufacturers and supplements can meet.
Okay. So they can do it that way. Well, that's some good stuff. Well, hey, thanks for being here today on the Confident Man podcast. We have a lot of guys who want to be healthy, and they hear about all this stuff. They watch a news show, but they're not sure where to start. And I think you've given them a lot to do that. And where can they go again? Tell us about your website again. Which one is it?
We're at lifestacks.com. That's life, STACKS.com.
Okay. And then your product you said was MCT?
Exactly. An MCT is a healthy fat, and then it's got a stack of nootropics that make you feel great and also support long-term cognitive function. And I should add that the most common use case is to add this to coffee. So we optimize the flavor, so it's a delicious alternative to your regular dairy creamer. It's vegan, it's low carb, it's very clean, no sugar. And so people can add that to coffee to basically, start the morning right. Why break your fast in the morning if you don't have to?
Yeah. Okay. I'm a hot tea guy, so I can add it to my tea, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Zack, Vincent, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
You've been listening to the Confident Man Podcast. Click subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. You can connect with David on Facebook and Instagram at David the Maxwell. Find resources to help you as a man at theconfidentman.me. That's theconfidentman.me.